Some stories crawl out of the grave. Others are buried beneath ice and silence. From the bone-dry heart of the Australian outback to the snow-blind trails of Siberia, terror doesn't knock. It waits. Here, we tell the tales that stay with you long after the fire's gone out. Zombies, vanished hikers, unsolved deaths, end-of-the-world whispers that echo through time. This is Aussie After Dark, the place where the line between fact and fear disappears. So light a candle, lock the doors, and don't blink. Because the story you're about to hear might just be true. And if you can take a second to subscribe, it really motivates and helps to continue these stories. In the far-flung reaches of southern Siberia, where ancient forests cloak jagged cliffs and time itself feels frozen, rises the Khamar-Daban mountain range. Isolated, unyielding, and largely untouched by civilization, this region stands as one of the last true wildernesses on Earth. Near its base, the vast icy mirror of Lake Baikal stretches into the horizon, the deepest lake in the world, and one steeped in myth and silence. Here, in August of 1993, 7 hikers set out into the wilderness. All were young, fit, well-trained, led by a woman whose life had been dedicated to mastering nature's harshest demands. They didn't expect comfort. They didn't expect ease. But what awaited them was something no one could have imagined. Within days, 6 of them would be dead, scattered across a forested slope in various states of trauma. Some had foam around their mouths, others had strange injuries. And their final moments, when pieced together, tell a story not just of physical collapse, but of something far more disturbing. Only one survived. This is the story of the Khamar-Daban Incident, a tragedy that continues to baffle investigators, a tale of survival wrapped in hysteria, death, and mystery, and a chilling echo of a darker, more infamous tale, the Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959. But unlike Dyatlov, this story has a living witness, and it begins with the leader. Lyudmila Ivanovna Korovina. Born on November 21, 1951, in the Soviet Union, she was a woman forged in the crucible of post-war resilience. By her 20s, Lyudmila had already built a reputation as one of the USSR's most capable wilderness instructors. She achieved the prestigious designation of Master of Sports, a title not easily earned. It marked her not just as a competent hiker, but as one of the elite. Lyudmila taught at the Petropavl-Azimut Tourist Club in northern Kazakhstan, where she trained dozens of students in high-discipline outdoor survival. Her methods were strict, some said severe. She believed in pushing people to their limits. To her, nature was not something to be feared, but understood, respected, conquered. Many of her pupils would go on to become leaders in their own right. And despite her no-nonsense approach, she was beloved by many. Her daughter, Natalia Korovina, later described her as tough but fair, someone who believed the mountains could teach you everything, if they didn't kill you first. She had led dozens of expeditions through treacherous terrain, from the Altai Mountains to the wilds of Kamchatka. But it was the Khamar-Daban range, near Lake Baikal, that Lyudmila knew best. She had hiked it more times than she could count. She knew its trails, its rivers, its weather patterns, and its hidden dangers. And so, in August of 1993, when she gathered 6 students, some of her most promising, for a high-difficulty trek through the region, no one questioned her capability. The trip was supposed to be a test of endurance, strength, and leadership. Instead, it became a nightmare. By the end of that week, Lyudmila would be dead, her body found face down in the moss, and 5 of her students would die beside her, some from exposure, others from something far stranger. But it didn't happen all at once. It began with a scream, and only one person, Valentina Utochenko, would live to tell us what she saw. Before the screams, before the deaths, they were just young people, hikers, students, dreamers, brought together by their shared love for the wild and their trust in the woman leading them. They were not thrill-seekers, not reckless. These were trained, disciplined hikers on a sanctioned expedition. 6 of them would die. 1 would live. Let us remember their names. Tatiana Yurievna Filipenko, 24. Born January 5, 1969. Tatiana was the oldest member of the group and served as a kind of unofficial second-in-command. At 24, she had years of hiking experience under her belt and was a familiar face within the Azimut Tourist Club. Her calm and analytical mind often helped diffuse tense moments during difficult expeditions. Friends described her as quiet, observant, and dependable. If Lyudmila was the iron spine of the group, Tatiana was its gentle heart, a source of stability when the terrain became harsh or the weather turned. She had participated in at least 4 multi-day expeditions in remote wilderness and was pursuing a degree in ecological studies. This was not just a passion for her, it was a calling. Alexander Gennadievich Krysin, 23. Born July 6, 1970. Nickname: Sasha. Alexander, or Sacha, as he was affectionately called, was Lyudmila's protege. He had trained under her for several years and had become something of a rising star in the hiking community. Those close to them said there was deep mutual respect between the two. Lyudmila trusted him to lead smaller teams and teach newer members. And she was especially gifted in navigation and survival techniques, often relied upon for compass work, orienteering, and route planning. Sasha was known for his stoicism, a natural leader in his own right. He had ambitions of becoming a full instructor at Azimut. On that fateful trip, he was likely the second most experienced person on the mountain. Denis Viktorovich Shvachkin, 19. Born April 23, 1974. Denis was the engine of the group. Energetic, passionate, and physically powerful, he was the kind of hiker who volunteered to carry the heaviest gear without complaint. He was new to the advanced tier expeditions, but not a novice. He had previously completed several intermediate hikes across the Altai region and was eager to prove himself on one of Lyudmila's more grueling tests. Though he was not yet as seasoned as Tatiana or Sacha, Lyudmila saw potential in him: raw strength, sharp instincts, and a quick learner. His goal was to eventually apply for the Master of Sports track Lyudmila once walked herself. Valentina Valya Utochenko, 17. The sole survivor. Valentina was just 17 years old when she entered the Khamar-Daban Mountains, the second youngest in the group. Bright-eyed, quiet, and driven, she idolized Lyudmila. Friends described her as hard-working, sometimes shy, but incredibly determined. This expedition was meant to be a turning point for her. She had trained for it extensively, mentally and physically, hoping it would lead to higher certification within Azimut. But what she endured would change her forever. Victoria Zalesova, 16. Born 1977. Victoria, called Vika by her friends, was one of the youngest members of the group. At just 16, this was her first major expedition, and she was elated to be chosen. She was known for her bubbly, cheerful personality and was said to be endlessly curious, always asking questions about plants, survival techniques, and terrain. To many, she brought a much-needed levity to the team, an innocent lightness in the face of rigorous training. Though she lacked experience, she was physically capable and extremely driven. She had been preparing for this trip for months. Lyudmila reportedly saw great promise in her. Timur Bapanov, 15. Born July 15th, 1978. Timur was the youngest of the seven, only 15 years old, but fiercely independent, strong for his age, and deeply committed to the sport. He and Valentina had grown close in training, friends bonded by their youth and shared admiration for the older students and instructors. Timur had a reputation for endurance, never backing down from a challenge, even when clearly exhausted. He idolized Sasha and often mimicked his methodical approach to hiking and gear setup. His parents were reportedly nervous about letting him go, but Lyudmila convinced them, assuring them it would be a safe, structured expedition. They could never have imagined how wrong things would go. 7 hikers, all disciplined, all trained, all under the watchful eye of a leader who knew these mountains better than anyone. So how did everything go so wrong? What happened in those forests? What caused them to scream, bleed, collapse? What force turned a structured hike into horror? We move now to the moment when the weather turned, when the fear began, and when survival no longer meant strength, but pure luck. August 1993, the final summer before the cold collapse of the Soviet Union's shadows gave way to the chaos of a new Russia. In the southern edges of Siberia, where the Khamar-Daban Mountains rise like an ancient vertebra of jagged stone, a hiking expedition began. It was meant to be a rite of passage. Lyudmila Ivanovna Korovina, a decorated hiking instructor and master of sports in tourism, led 6 young students into the wild for a multi-day trek that was supposed to test them, push them, but ultimately bring them home stronger. The youngest was 15, the oldest, 24. All were hand-picked from her elite training group in Kazakhstan's Petropavl-Azimut Tourist Club. These were not amateurs. They were physically fit, mentally hardened, and well-trained in mountain survival. Their goal, a 70 to 80-kilometer route starting from the village of Marino, across the rugged ridges of the Khamar-Daban range. They were scheduled to rendezvous with another group, led by Lyudmila's daughter, Natalia Korovina, on August 5th. The first days went smoothly. They made strong progress. They climbed slopes like Mount Retransliator with relative ease. The young hikers were in good spirits, laughing, documenting their journey, even singing during their descents. But August 4th changed everything. A sudden weather shift swept through the mountain range. Torrential rain fell, soaking their gear. Temperatures dropped sharply. Exhausted from the climb and short on energy, the group made a fateful decision. Instead of descending into tree cover for shelter, Korovina chose to camp on an exposed slope, believing her students were too drained to continue. They failed to build a fire that night. The hikers lay cold, wet, and shivering on the frozen ground. Hypothermia began to creep in. They survived the night, but something unseen had already begun. August 5th, 1993. The group broke camp at dawn. Spirits were low, but the weather was beginning to clear. They managed a small breakfast and pressed on. They began descending from a peak known as Tritoranch, roughly 20 kilometers from their meeting point with Natalia's group. That's when the horror began. According to 17-year-old Valentina Utachenko, the only survivor, the nightmare started with Alexander Gennadievich Krysin, the 23-year-old protege of Korovina. Sasha Krysin suddenly screamed, loud, uncontrollable, primal. He clutched his chest. Blood began streaming from his nose, then his eyes and ears. His limbs twisted in spasms. He fell to the ground, frothing at the mouth, choking. His back arched unnaturally before he collapsed. Still. Panic erupted. Lyudmila Korovina, shocked but composed, rushed to his side. She had trained for injuries, altitude sickness, even sudden illness. But what she saw terrified her. Moments later, she began to convulse, just like Krysin. Her eyes rolled back. Blood leaked from her mouth. She fell across his body, shaking, gasping, and then silence. The group froze. Tatiana Filipenko, the calm, collected 24-year-old, tried to help. But as she approached Lyudmila's body, she collapsed too. Gasping, clawing at her throat, unable to breathe. In blind terror, she crawled to a nearby rock and began slamming her head into it repeatedly until her skull fractured. She fell still. The younger hikers, Victoria Zelesova, 16, and Timur Bapanov, 15, screamed and ran downhill. Their survival instinct kicked in, but it was too late. Both were soon seen vomiting blood, convulsing, tearing at their throats as if something inside them was burning. Within minutes, they too collapsed. Only two remained, Valentina Utochenko and Denis Shvachkin, 19. They turned and ran together, stumbling downhill. But then Denis stopped. His body shook. He fell to his knees, groaned, and began convulsing violently. Valentina didn't wait. 17-year-old Valentina Utochenko had just watched 6 of her closest friends, mentors, peers, protectors, die in some of the most agonizing, unnatural ways imaginable. But she didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She ran. Driven by pure instinct, Valentina fled into the dense woods of the Khamar-Daban Mountains, soaked to the bone, with nothing but terror to fuel her. Eventually, as darkness fell, she found tree cover and somehow managed to set up a small tent. Alone, in a wilderness known for bears, wolves, and brutal weather shifts. She didn't sleep. The next morning, with the courage that defies explanation, Valentina returned to the site of the tragedy. She approached the twisted bodies of her companions, some half-dressed, others still frozen in grotesque, agonized poses. She didn't linger. She knew time was running out. Valentina gathered essential supplies, food, maps, warmer clothes, from the bags scattered around the camp. Then she turned her back on the horror and began her descent. With no idea where she was on the map, she followed the only man-made marker she could find: power lines. For 4 days, she followed the faint buzz of overhead wires, her only guide out of the endless forest. She had no radio, no contact with the outside world. She was starving, thirsty, exhausted. Eventually, she came upon a river, too wide to cross, too dangerous to follow. But fate intervened. On August 9th, nearly 4 full days after the deaths, Valentina was discovered by a group of Ukrainian kayakers making their way along the river. They spotted her hunched on the bank, waving desperately. They brought her to the nearest village. From there, she was taken to the local police station, dazed, dehydrated, and nearly incoherent from trauma. And yet, despite her testimony, despite her desperation, a formal search operation wasn't launched until August 24th, nearly 3 weeks after the incident. By then, the remote mountain weather had shifted again. Rain, wind, and exposure had taken their toll. Rescue teams found the bodies scattered across the slope near the site of the tragedy. Some were partially clothed, others were naked from the waist up. Most showed signs of physical trauma: broken bones, bruises, blood-stained faces. Some had bite marks, but not from animals. And while autopsies officially reported hypothermia as the cause of death in 5 of the victims, with Lyudmila Korovina's death attributed to a heart attack, the details didn't add up. The bodies showed signs inconsistent with a simple freeze. Multiple victims had blood in their lungs, suggesting pulmonary hemorrhaging. Some had foam around the mouth, a symptom of chemical exposure or intense physical trauma. One had a fractured skull from blunt force trauma. And yet, no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play, no injuries from animals, no nearby toxins or radioactive sources were officially found. The official report closed the case, but to this day, many questions remain. What killed the Korovina group? Was it exposure to an unknown toxin or gas? A freak environmental phenomenon? A case of shared psychosis and panic? Or was something darker at play in the remote reaches of Khamar-Daban? Several theories have been proposed to explain the incident. Decades later, the Khamar-Daban tragedy continues to perplex experts, researchers, and mountain historians alike. Despite thorough investigation and countless theories, no definitive explanation has ever been agreed upon. Instead, we're left with questions, half-answered, often contradictory, and a handful of chilling possibilities. Theory 1. Environmental toxins. One of the earliest suggestions involved poisonous mushrooms or contaminated water sources. In the wilds of Siberia, certain fungi can cause severe hallucinations, convulsions, and even fatal seizures. Others speculated that runoff from old mining sites or natural toxins in the soil might have tainted a water source the group drank from. Yet no toxins were detected during autopsies. The hikers' food reserves showed no sign of spoilage. Water samples later taken from the region tested clean. The toxin theory, while plausible in theory, remains unsupported by evidence. Theory 2. Infrasound-induced panic. Borrowing from hypotheses surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959, some researchers proposed the presence of infrasound, low-frequency sound waves generated by wind interacting with mountain peaks. These waves, though inaudible, can cause feelings of dread, disorientation, and even physical illness. Could such a phenomenon have triggered mass hysteria, leading the hikers to panic, injure themselves, or collapse under psychosomatic symptoms? While this may explain erratic behavior, it doesn't account for the violent physical symptoms witnessed: bleeding from the eyes, foaming at the mouth, convulsions. Infrasound can disturb, but not destroy. Theory 3. Military activity and chemical exposure. Southern Siberia has long been a remote and restricted region. During the Soviet era and into the early 1990s, nearby areas hosted classified military installations, biochemical research facilities, and test ranges. Some believe the hikers may have stumbled into the residual effects of a military experiment gone wrong. Perhaps nerve agents, aerosolized chemicals, or even a decaying munition left behind. Valentina's account of rapid, graphic symptoms in multiple group members bears resemblance to nerve toxin exposure. The bleeding, choking, and sudden heart failures, though speculative, align with known effects of certain banned substances. However, no official confirmation has ever surfaced. Russia's military archives remain sealed, and no other recorded cases in the region match this profile. Theory 4. Psychogenic illness, shared trauma response. Another theory leans not on science, but psychology. Could the group, already soaked, exhausted, freezing, have succumbed to a shared psychogenic event? A type of mass hysteria driven by extreme stress, sleep deprivation, and fear? While rare, such episodes have been documented. Groups experiencing hallucinations, paranoia, or psychosomatic seizures under duress. It's possible that one hiker's sudden death triggered a domino effect of terror, pushing the others into panic, erratic behavior, or fatal misjudgments, like fleeing without shoes or attacking themselves. But again, this doesn't fully explain the extreme physical trauma seen in the victims, nor does it account for Lyudmila Korovina, a hardened instructor with decades of survival experience, collapsing after witnessing one death. The Khamar-Daban incident remains one of the most haunting unsolved tragedies in modern mountaineering history. Of the 7 who entered the wilderness, only 1 returned. Valentina Utochenko, just 17 at the time, chose a life of quiet anonymity. She has rarely spoken publicly since. Some say she still hikes, alone, through less treacherous paths. Others believe she left the mountains behind forever. As for the others, Lyudmila, Tatiana, Alexander, Denis, Victoria, and Timur, they were more than victims of an unsolved case. They were friends, learners, explorers, a team bound by courage, undone by something still unexplainable. As the shadows lengthen over the peaks of southern Siberia, the whispers of that August still echo across the ridgelines. No conclusive evidence, no confessions, just silence.